think of when they say conservative Judaism is what Rabbi Feinstein just alluded to, which is we're a set of institutions and organizations, like synagogues and schools and camps. We're something they call a movement. And that's where you get into these issues of demographics and numbers. So I want to tackle that question head on. But I also want to refer you to something, if you want to read something further of me by this, go to the web, look me up, Google me. When this Pew report came out, which was rather discouraging about our future, I wrote an essay called L'chaim to Conservative Judaism, to life to Conservative Judaism. And that's where, in brief, I laid out the points that you'll be hearing from me today. But if you want to look at them further and weigh them, go to this piece called L'chaim to Conservative Judaism. The Pew report was extremely unfair to conservative Judaism. It was unfair because it divided the world into Orthodox Jews and non-Orthodox Jews, and it didn't break down the non-Orthodox Jews. And so it came out around September, a couple years ago, and then in June, Professor Jack Wertheimer of JTS and Professor Stephen Cohen of Hebrew Union College put out an analysis of the Pew report's own data where they what's called disaggregated. They took the data apart and they found out what's true of conservative Jews. So in direct answer to Rabbi Feinstein's question, it is undoubtedly true that our movement is growing smaller in numbers. Undoubtedly true. And you have to ask why. So the only part of Judaism that's really not growing smaller in numbers is Orthodoxy. Reform is holding its own. And I would say Reform is holding its own thanks to two decisions which are crucial to the Reform movement right now. One is patrilineal descent, and the other one is the decision to perform intermarriages. The entire growth of Reform Judaism in our generation consists of non-Jewish members of Reform synagogues. That is, spouses of Jews who have never converted. There is no doubt that if we were agreeing to perform intermarriages, conservative Judaism would have some of those numbers. My conservative synagogue in Palo Alto, where I was a member for 21 years, is right down the street from a wonderful Reform synagogue. And if you're an intermarried couple and the wife is the non-Jew, that child without conversion is not considered a Jew in Congregation Kol Hamet. You go down the street to Congregation Beth Am, that child of a non-Jewish mother is a Jew. That is no doubt an advantage when it comes to numbers. I think one can't deny this. So Reform is holding its own. And when you call someone up on the phone and say, are you a Jew? And they say yes, and you say, what kind of Jew are you? That's where conservative Judaism has fallen. Because it used to be that 38% of people said, yes, I'm a conservative Jew to that. Now only 19% say, I'm a conservative Jew. Because what do they know about Judaism? They know that conservative Judaism doesn't perform intermarriages, and many of these people answering the phone are themselves intermarried or the children of intermarriages. Orthodoxy is growing by leaps and bounds, overwhelmingly because of one simple reason: having more kids. Having more kids. It happens that 2/3 of the kids born Orthodox stay Orthodox, whereas only 1/3 of the kids born Reform or Conservative stay Reform or Conservative. Americans do not stay what they were born. Here's another statistic for you. Of the people in the United States who currently identify with a religion, which is something like 90% of Americans, 44% say they're practicing a different religion than the one they were born in. That counts, by the way, if you were born a Baptist and you're now an Episcopalian, it's a different religion. If you know Baptism and Episcopalians, it's true, it's a different religion. They're both Christian, but the differences are broad. So you look at us in context and you say, why are we not growing? And another study by Steve and Jack, it came out last month, just Google them, Steve Cohen, Jack Wertheimer, said conservative Judaism has lost numbers, but we haven't lost activists. In other words, the number of conservative Jews who are active in conservative synagogues has not fallen in the last 25 years. So the Jews you lose are the Jews who are inactive. That makes sense. You lose some to Orthodoxy among your most active. That's true. Those numbers are evident to all of us. All of us know people who have left conservative synagogues and become Orthodox, but this is not a large number. It's a relatively small number. Most of the Jews who leave conservative Judaism leave Judaism. So when I see this question of numbers, I say to myself, we have to do all we can, obviously, to increase numbers. We have to keep critical mass. But the most important thing we got to do is offer a product that's quality. Offer people what Judaism offers them, which in my language is a combination of meaning to live by and community that is palpable. Face-to-face community and meaning, and you do that, and people will come back for more. And so when we do that, we are incredibly successful. The Ramah system is incredibly successful. Most Ramah camps are oversubscribed. They have waiting lists. There are some sector schools which are doing great jobs and which are fine. There are some synagogues that are fine. They're growing. Synagogues are growing, and many synagogues, and I think you're one of them, are growing with young people. JTS is doing Kinderhara just fine. I think Ziegler, AJU, they're doing fine. I could go to the list. There are a lot of institutions that are doing fine. So when you say conservative Judaism is in decline, we're talking about some national organizations and institutions which have some problems, and we're talking about numbers, and I'm telling you, the Jews have never survived by numbers. So if you're worried about numbers, the Jewish people is in terrible shape. The world has how many billions now? And we have maybe 15 million Jews. The United States has 340 million people, and we have 15. We are falling as a market share of the world population. We're falling as a share of the American population, and our numbers at present are only holding fast because of ultra-Orthodox birth rate. If the Haredim were not having as many kids, the Jewish population in this country would already have dropped precipitously. So I respond to this question by yes, there are some synagogues that are folding. It's not happy news. There are some Schechter schools that are folding. That's not happy news. Some things are not succeeding. But I think we got a great product here. And our task is to get our act together on a national level and work together. If we were a movement, the parts of which actually worked together, it'd be apparent to all of you how strong we are. So Ed and I are at a United Synagogue Convention. It barely draws 1,000 people when the URJ Biennial draws 5,000. Well, I have to say, our men's club and our women's league and our rabbinical assembly all insist on having separate conventions. We won't have our conventions together. And this is symptomatic of a movement which consists of 20 different organizations. 20 different organizations. So if you're facing a crisis, you might think you would want to get yourselves organized to face up to this crisis and put all your strength out there. And we, the conservative movement, are mired in disunity, which has been our inheritance for the last 50 years. So that's a short answer to your question. But I'm convinced that our future is actually bright if you don't just count the numbers. I'm convinced that if we continue to build a number of strong institutions like this one at the local level and attract people to these institutions, we will eventually see numerical growth as well because people will go where quality is.
Okay, there's an awful lot of questions that one could ask to sort of take this thing apart. So let me try to begin to ask a few of them, and then I think we'll let other people ask them as well. So one of the questions is, given where we are today, both demographically and ideologically, whether the sharp, both institutional and ideological divides between conservative and Reform Judaism really make any sense anymore, or whether in fact the institutions should allow a greater flow of people and ideas between these two movements so that its strengths could be combined instead of divided.
Solomon Schechter had an idea which he called Catholic Israel, Catholic in the sense of universal. And to mark his 100th yahrzeit, which happened last week, I not only went to the grave in Queens and stood at the grave and meditated for a while, but I called a closed-door meeting at JTS where we had the leaders and other figures from all the branches of Judaism, because Schechter had this vision of Jewish unity, and I wanted to see to what extent it could be possible. We couldn't do it publicly for obvious reasons, but we had Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, and Reconstructionist Jews asking the question which Rabbi Feinstein just asked, which is, in this day and age, do we really need all these denominations? What could we agree on? And that's not a discussion you can finish in 4 hours, but I'm really proud to say we've started it and we're going to continue. I wrote this book. Those of you who have decent eyesight can probably make out the word Judaism there. You probably can't make out the word conservative because I put it in smaller letters. So if you're writing a book to explain to people what conservative Judaism is, to my mind, you talk about Judaism. And when people say to me, Professor Eisen, I read through the first 3 or 4 chapters. I'm Orthodox. I agree with everything you said. I don't regard this as a failing. We're both Jews. We're both practicing Judaism. It's only when you get further in the book you start to say to yourself, aha, he's presenting Judaism in a different way than a Reformed Jew or an Orthodox Jew might have presented it. And only at the end of the book, the very last chapter, is called Denominations in Judaism. Because I myself, being a conservative Jew, being an heir to Solomon Schechter, I believe that Judaism is much more important than the different types of Judaism. I believe the Jewish people is much more important than all these different groups. And so I'm here to teach Judaism. Now, my rule of thumb is you cooperate with people as much as you possibly can. We have way too many buildings in this Jewish world of ours. Most of our buildings are empty 90% of the time.
Not this one, though.
Not this one.
This one needs more buildings because
I understand.
Full.
You've heard that JTS is going to build buildings because we also need refurbished buildings. And you can't just keep 100-year-old buildings and serve your time and place. You have to have buildings that are in step. Just the wiring, just to keep up with internet demand, right? You have to keep up. Sometimes you have to build buildings. But we have way too many organizations. We could do with a great deal of cooperation. But there's some things you have to do differently. So when I was a professor at Stanford, my wife and I, as you may have heard earlier, so we have a baby girl. So we go to the rabbi of the day school in town. The only day school in town at that point was Orthodox. And he very nicely explains to us that from the age of 7, our daughter will be studying differently than the boys would be. And we walked out and said, thank you very much, and we helped to found a day school. Because there's some things you have to do differently. I have points of principle, and the fact that women are going to study Torah just as much as men and be leaders of the Jewish community, I'm going to do that. And even my friend Asher Lopatin, who's the head of the modern Orthodox or open Orthodox yeshiva called Yeshivat Chovevei Torah in Riverdale, who came to the meeting last week at JTS, Asher Lopatin will not allow his rabbinical students to pray in a minyan where women are davening. This is open orthodoxy. This is the most progressive kind of orthodoxy, and his students are not allowed to set foot in a minyan where a woman is davening. That's not acceptable. So therefore, you can't just be one movement. And on the other side, Reform does some things differently. They're becoming more and more like us. You may have heard the recent address of Rick Jacobs at the URJ Biennial, where he called on Reform Jews to do more than Tikkun Olam. He said, you got to do Torah study as well. Good, that's right. But we have a different approach to some things that is worth doing differently. So it may turn out, at the end of the day, that Jews on the more traditional side of conservative are going to blend with modern orthodoxy, and Jews on the less traditional side of conservative are going to blend with reform. This may work itself out. To my mind, it's of minor significance. Organizations, institutions are here to serve higher purposes. We're here to live Torah. We're here to teach Torah. I'm here to learn from everybody. So that's my answer to that. I think conservative Judaism has a lot that's distinctive to offer, but where we're not distinctive, I agree 100%. There's no point doing things by yourself if you're doing the same as the person next door. Do them together. Save money. Get more good teachers.
I want to ask you an ideological question, and then we'll let people ask you lots of questions. So in 1964, as you know, Look magazine published a very noted article by a Harvard sociologist who predicted that by the end of the 1980s, there'd be no Judaism left in America except for the very extreme Orthodox. It was a cover article called The Vanishing American Jew. Now, we look out in the community and we see 5th and 6th generation American Jews. This sociologist argued that in American culture, by the 3rd generation, ethnicities disappear. You have an immigrant generation, you have a first generation of Americans, you have a 3rd generation that sort of has to assimilate the best of the immigrant culture with America, but by the 4th generation, there are no more real Irish Americans, there's no more real Italian Americans. people, they maintain ethnic affectations as a sort of kitsch, but it's not a real thing anymore.
That's right.
So you're a student of Jewish identity.
Yes.
As a profession before
Yes.
you became chancellor.
Yes.
You actually were, you taught this stuff and studied this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What is it? What holds these people into now a fifth and sixth generation that the guy who wrote the Look magazine article didn't catch? What's holding us in? Or rather, what are they looking for that they're getting or not getting among us?
So the hard part for contemporary Jews is that the religion thing doesn't sit very well with many Jews. And ethnic identity, I can pretty much say this categorically based on all the evidence, ethnic identity alone does not work. As Rabbi Feinstein just said, Italian American identity, it's nostalgia. And the bad news for Jews, because I think Jews follow general trends, the bad news for Jews is we now have some data that third-generation Latinos are no longer speaking Spanish, and third-generation Chinese Americans are no longer learning Chinese, which means that they're also going to go the way of assimilation unless they find something to bar assimilation, or unless they're discriminated against and no one wants to marry them. So we Jews, being among the most highly educated, affluent sector of American population, wanting to be part of the larger culture, we look around, and people like us outside the Jewish world who used to be believing Christians are no longer believing Christians. And so a lot of Jews are drawn to a notion of Judaism as ethnic identity. All the evidence is, and including the latest evidence from the Pew Report and other studies, that Jews who define themselves only as an ethnic identity do not last more than one generation in that identity. You can't pass it on to your kids, which means, in answer to your question, this religion thing of ours, the way we do it, which is different than the way anybody else does it, holds the secret. So the Pew Report, let's go back to the Pew Report, because this is important. You'll hear I want you all to understand how it works. So they call you up and they say, do you have a religion? And you say yes. And they say, what is your religion? And you say Jewish. You become a JBR, a Jew by religion. And if you answer no, I am not religious, but they determine by a series of questions that you're Jewish anyway, you become a JNR, a Jew not by religion. Everybody with me? Then they ask the JBRs the following question. You're a Jew by religion. How important is religion to your identity? 70% of the JBRs say that religion is not the most important part of their identity. Community, peoplehood, parents, nostalgia, Israel, Holocaust, all these things. I did this survey in 3 different conservative synagogues last year, and I got the same answer. Here you are on a Saturday morning, you're in a conservative synagogue, we're in the middle of a synagogue service, you're a Jew by religion. For how many of you is religion the most important part of your Jewish identity? Maybe 25 or 30% said it was. So, I'm convinced that this sense of connection that we have to a people, which stands for doing good in the world, and the sense of connection you have to God, while not allowing any one dogmatic definition of God to hold sway. We don't demand assent to people believing in God a particular way. You can be an atheist, that's fine. You know this joke about the Jews who are debating whether God exists or not. And then it gets to be 3 o'clock, they have to take a break because they have to daven mincha to go back to their debate about whether God exists or not, right? That's profound. That's us. And I think it's that combination of being out there in the world, knowing we're here as a covenant people to do good things in the world, to make more righteousness, to make more compassion. We're tied to that which is highest and deepest in the world. We're not just an ethnic group, but we're also a people. That particular combination, which is actually unique to us. It's not just, the Chancellor of JTS saying this is unique. I think as a professor of comparative religion, we're all on safe ground saying, this is unique. Islam doesn't do it like this, and Christianity doesn't do it like this, and the Buddhists and the Hindus, nobody does it like this. This combination of peoplehood and some kind of faith, which goes back to the very covenant at Sinai, that's unique to us. And I think that's the secret. That's the Pintel Yid. And as I said earlier, I'm in Tel Aviv last Hanukkah. And, and I'm wondering, like, all these Tel Avivim who are so-called secular Jews, and with all the high tech, and they're not religiously observant, but you say the words Am Yisrael Chai, which is what the holiday of Hanukkah is all about. Tried to get rid of us that time, tried to get rid of us lots of more times. We're still here. Am Yisrael Chai. That vibrates, that pulsates. And that Am Yisrael Chai is going to keep the Jews alive. We're very stubborn. We're not going to let them get rid of us or what we stand for. And that's going to keep us going, I think, for a long time to come. Whether our numbers grow or our numbers shrink a little bit, that's what's going to keep us going.
So let me raise what's a really difficult question, and I'll leave you the freedom to answer it any way that you want, which is that if Am Yisrael Chai is such a compelling thing, there is a very high rate of intermarriage in the community. In certain communities, 50%, 70%. There's a very high rate of Jewish people marrying non-Jewish people. And the question is then, how do we as a movement, as a affiliated organizations, how does the Jewish community deal with that phenomena?
See, I think, and most of the evidence indicates, that most Jews who marry non-Jews do not have any intention of abandoning Judaism thereby. And there are some Jews who marry non-Jews who don't care about whether the kids are raised Jewish or not, but a lot of Jews marry non-Jews on the condition that the kids be raised as Jews. So they're not seeing themselves as abandoning the Jewish people or abandoning Judaism. They think, like all of us think, that I can have it both ways. And some do succeed, and I have among my closest friends and family members Jews who are intermarried, who are raising Jewish kids and are integral parts of a Jewish community, and they're managing it. Unfortunately, the statistics are against you. So you know that the great bulk of intermarried families do not raise Jewish kids. And the sad fact is, regardless of what your intentions may be to your kids, a teeny tiny percentage of the children of intermarriages actually marry Jews themselves. Teeny tiny percentage, which is that the chances of having Jewish grandchildren if you intermarry are something like 7%. 7%. So that's very discouraging. And my feeling is, you get to the hard stuff, so what should we do about it? And thank goodness it's not my voice alone. I'm one of a number of people, and I participate in lots of meetings, some of them public like this, and some of them behind closed doors, where we're trying to figure out what to do here. And the first thing you have to do, and I'm not telling you all something you don't know, because Rabbi Harold Schulweis would have said this before any of the rest of us did, and certainly Rabbi Feinstein said this, you can't just say no, you have to say yes. My rule is, for every no you say 5 yeses. So I can't do this. Okay, what am I going to do? How in the Jewish community, how is the synagogue going to be part of this couple's life and bring them near and keep them, provide them with meaning, provide them with community, with the hope that someday you'll have both parents being Jews and raising Jewish children. But even if you don't, we want this couple and their family in our midst, because they're human beings, they have hearts and souls and might, and we have something to offer them, and they have something to offer us. So it's ambiguous, it's murky. So the conservative movement, I believe, cannot and should not just say, yes, it's okay, can't stop it, let's join it, let's celebrate it. And when we had our meeting last week at JTS, as you can imagine, with Reform, Reconstructionist, Orthodox, and conservative rabbis and leaders together in a room around the table, the biggest dividing line is now on the who is a Jew questions. Because the Reconstructionist Medical College 4 weeks ago, announced that it's now going to ordain rabbis who are intermarried. So it's okay for rabbis themselves to be intermarried and be ordained at RSC. HUC decided not to do that. And of course, the question has not arisen at the Orthodox institutions or at JTS. It will come. It will come. But this is a major thing. And my feeling is that intermarriage is not the threat to Jewish life. I do not believe that. The threat to Jewish life is assimilation. And intermarriage and assimilation don't necessarily go together. So we've got to separate intermarriage from assimilation and convince people that they really want to be part of the Jewish community. You want to get really depressed. Here's the most depressing statistic I know about Jewish life. The data is from the Pew Report. Thank goodness it didn't make the headlines, but it's in the Pew Report. There are 2 million individuals alive in the United States today, 2 million, who are the child of at least one Jewish parent, and who, if you say to them, "Are you a Jew?" will say no. 2 million people. The child of a Jewish parent, who, if you say, "Are you Jewish?" will say no. That is what keeps me up at night. That's unacceptable. We cannot allow that to happen for another generation. We can't lose another 2 million people in the next generation. So therefore, it's our job to put out 1 million yeses, 1 million entry points, 1 million points of life, 1 million ways to get people involved in the Jewish community and in Judaism. That's our responsibilities. You asked me earlier, do I have a sense of this? Yes, I sit in a chair. I have a bully pulpit. I can write something, as I did last week, about Donald Trump. And no, I don't know if people are going to read it, but it's going to reach 30,000 people, right? At least, plus whatever Fortune magazine does, because it was on their website. But the JTS website alone is going to put it in the hands of 30,000 people. Okay, that's good. So you and I have to use our leadership positions in this generation to bring as many Jews close and keep as many Jews close as we possibly can, because we just can't allow this to continue as it has been.
Of course, the greatest painful irony is that for whatever our feelings are about Donald Trump, his grandchildren are Jewish, right? Let's get some questions.
Irony of ironies.
It's the truth. Let's get a few questions.
Not unrelated to some anti-Semitic remarks he's made in the last few weeks, I believe.
You know what? Isn't that interesting? Scott, tell us.
Birth rate.
So what about just that Judaism is a central part of who they are? And for most, it seems like in our community, and Judaism is important. It's very important, but for most of the community, it's probably a central part of who we are.
That's right.
Let me just repeat the question for the ages. So you mentioned that the birth rate in the Orthodox community is principally responsible for the growth in Orthodoxy. And Scott asked the question, isn't it also attributable to the fact that being Jewish is so much more salient
Absolutely.
part of their ideals, of their identity?
Absolutely. And the fact that there's a norm, and the norm can get enforced, whether that norm is Torah study for men and increasingly for women, or whether that norm is Shabbat, or that norm is Bikur Cholim and taking care of people, or the norm is to have large families. And so they can do that, so it's a circle, right? So the community is sustained by the birth rate, but the desire to have the kids, the willingness to have the kids is sustained by the community. Now, one of the reasons the Haredim can have so many kids and afford it, first of all, there's a huge amount of welfare. And what the New York population survey turned up, I don't know about the LA population, but an enormous percentage of Haredim in New York City are poor. They're living below the poverty level. And the third thing is they don't send their kids to university. So for those of us who have the expense of university, it's huge. And think about it, for conservative Jews and modern Orthodox Jews, the expense is the greatest. Why? Because we have synagogues like this one, which have high membership dues. We send our kids to day school. We send our kids to university, and in many cases to graduate school. So if you're going to be conservative and modern Orthodox, you get synagogue expenses, camp expenses, day school expenses, and then university. Reform lacks the day school piece. A teeny tiny percentage of Reform Jews are in day school. So that's one of the differences between conservative Judaism and Reform Judaism is the level of Jewish knowledge, the level of Jewish learning. Their camp movement is smaller. They don't have the thickness of Jewish life that conservative does, and that thickness costs money. But you're absolutely right. And there is simply no salvation for us unless we are more proactive in getting Jews to put Judaism at the center of their lives. We all have a long historical memory, and sometimes it doesn't help us. We remember a time when Jewish identity was taken for granted. And even Mordechai Kaplan, he just assumed you're going to marry a Jew if you're a Jew. For most American Jews, it's a leisure time activity at best. And a leisure time activity has no staying power. So if that remains the case for conservative Jews, we will continue to lose numbers. And by the way, read Steve Cohen on this, Reform Judaism is about to start losing numbers. Because it turns out that the thinness of Jewish life does not keep people in the door. So even if you have a temporary bump in people joining synagogues because of intermarriages, they don't stay very long. This is not schadenfreude. I wish them the best. I want them to have as much success as they can. I want there to be a thriving Reform Judaism. But it's not as if they have a recipe that we lack. Right? So if you want to be Orthodox, it's a bet. And I know it's painful to me. I know a number of Jewish women who are feminists. And they say, I'm sacrificing my feminism for the sake of Shabbos. I want to have a strong Shabbat in my life. That's worth it to me, for me and my family. So I'll put my feminism on hold and be an Orthodox Jew where I can't show my face behind the mechitza, I can't raise my voice, I can't teach Torah. Okay, I'll do it. And that's sad. They shouldn't have to do that. There should be thriving conservative synagogues with enough Shabbos so that we can give them what they need.
Okay, Ron.
Professor, don't be insulted.
It's hard to insult me.
Why? I find very little difference. I go to Stephen Wise, and they're wearing yarmulkes, they're speaking Hebrew. There's very little difference now between conservative and liberal. Why not join together?
So the question is that if you attend a Reform congregation now, and you walked in, you find very little difference between the style of the place. Yarmulkes are worn, Hebrew is spoken, prayers are said in the traditional idiom. You find very little difference between those practices and the practices you'd find in a conservative synagogue. And the question is, why remain separate?
See, if I could have a blackboard here, I take you back to your junior high school math classes. Remember what Venn diagrams were? So it would be wrong to think of it like Reform is over here, and conservative is over here, and Orthodox is over there, and there's ultra-Orthodox on that end, and totally assimilated on that end. And they're not 5 different points. The Venn diagram was these circles that overlapped. So there's a lot of overlap, of course there is, between some conservative Jews and some Reform Jews. And on the other end, there's a lot of overlap between some conservative Jews and some modern Orthodox Jews. Right? I myself am more on the modern Orthodox side of conservative, but okay. And ironically, if you put it on a blackboard, there's some ways in which Reform and Orthodoxy get together that are different from conservative. It's interesting. So you happen to know a congregation, and there are some, where the level of Hebrew is almost as much as it is in a conservative synagogue. But we have the data on how Reform Jews live, and how conservative Jews live, and how Orthodox Jews live. And so rather than look at the individual cases of the overlap, look at the aggregates, and you see the movements are quite distinctive in the kind of Jewish lives they foster. You will always find some Reform Jews who are more observant than some conservative Jews. Believe me, there are some conservative Jews who are more observant than some Orthodox Jews. I was in Palm Beach last week. I had lunch with a member of the Orthodox Synagogue of Palm Beach. He informed me that something like 90 or 95% of the members of that Palm Beach Orthodox Synagogue drive to synagogue every Shabbat. They park a block away, but they drive to synagogue on Shabbat. This used to be common in Orthodox synagogues in the United States. I know conservative Jews who walk to synagogue on Shabbat. Right? So the differences are not night and day, and I'm not putting conservative Judaism up here and putting Reform down there. I am a pluralist. And I'm saying wherever we should cooperate, wherever we can cooperate, we should cooperate, and that's why I had this meeting at JTS last week. I want a lot more cooperation. We have these distinctive seminaries. It's good for the professors that they're distinctive seminaries. It's bad for the budgets. We could share a lot of faculty at our seminaries. We could share a lot of Hebrew instruction. Our Jewish schools could share a lot. We need fewer buildings. I'm all for the cooperation if we can have it.
Karen?
I'm interested in numbers as a data analyst. Anyway, you talked about the survey that if people were asked, are they Jewish, and you said, later you found out they were not Jewish by religion. I want to understand how many people were Jewish but were unaffiliated.
Huge numbers.
I think that conservatives who drop out aren't going anywhere. They're just not paying dues.
There is some of that, and there is a small. So let's talk about the numbers and who are these people who are
Unaffiliated
Jewish but
Jews.
unaffiliated.
You're talking about Jewish unaffiliated.
So first of all, the membership number to me is more significant than the answer to the question: are you Jewish? What kind of Jew are you? If you look at the membership numbers, okay, virtually every Orthodox Jew is counted as a member of a synagogue, by definition, whether you pay dues or not. That comes with being Orthodox. 9% of American Jews. You like the numbers? 3% modern Orthodox, 6% ultra-Orthodox. 9% of American Jews are Orthodox, despite a huge birth rate, by the way, for the last 20 years. So they're growing, and they will keep growing, but they're not at the numbers you think they are. And one of the reasons they're not is that 1/3 of the people raised Orthodox do not remain Orthodox. You don't hear about them. What's the conservative membership percentage? 11 or 12. What's the Reform membership? 14. I don't think there's significant differences. 9, 11, 14. That's the membership. The hard part is add it up. That's the question you asked me. So 9 plus 11 is 20, and 14 is 34. Add 1% more for Reconstructionists, you get to 35. Maybe some people you can't count. The membership of synagogues in America today is less than 40%. That's a dramatic decline from 15 or 20 years ago, and it follows the decline in the membership of churches. And that's my point here. Before we start beating our breasts and saying, we're doing things badly, it must be our fault, recognize Americans don't want to join anything. The number of Protestants in America dropped 8% in the last 8 years. 8% in 8 years. Not because people died. People who belonged to Protestant churches just left. A few of them became Catholics. Most of them just left. So when Jews leave synagogues, don't be surprised, Protestants are leaving Protestantism. So unaffiliated is now the rule. The fastest growing religion by far is none, N-O-N-E. By far the fastest growing religion. In 1990, the fastest growing religion was Mormons and evangelical Protestants. No more. At best, they're holding steady. The only religion on the rise is none. Right? So we're living in a secular country. And Jews want to fit in. Not just, I'm not demeaning them. People have consciousness framed by what's out there. And every time that a terrorist goes and kills people in the name of Allah, the market share of religion goes down. Every time Jews say, well, what is it to be a Jew? And their answer is a guy in a long black coat, the market share goes down. Naftali Bennett, who is a very ambitious Israeli politician, sits in the cabinet. He has several ministries that he's in charge of right now. He went to visit a Solomon Schechter school in Manhattan last week. Can you imagine? An Orthodox Jew, a member of the Israeli cabinet, went to visit a Solomon Schechter school. He was attacked by the Israeli chief rabbi the next day for setting foot in a conservative school because they're teaching heresy. The market share of Judaism goes down among many young Jews when they read that story in the New York Times. Right? So we've got a problem. We've got a terrible marketing problem. We've got to put out there a vision of Judaism, our kind of Judaism, which is on the front lines fighting a lot of battles that need to be fought. But even that doesn't help until you get people in the door and give them an experience. And this is why, you've heard me on this already, I'm not a big fan of the surveys. They tell us some information. I wrote a book with Stephen Cohen. I think the surveys are worthwhile. You got to get beyond the surveys. I pay respect to the numbers, but I want to know why. That's what Max Weber taught me, the great sociologist Max Weber. You got to do verstehen. Get inside to understand it. Figure out why is it happening. And I think the answer is because of meaning and community. Those Orthodox Jews, God is there. God.
Okay. Yeah.
What can we do to get rid of the sense among conservative Jews that we're secondary? And here again, the statistics don't help us because they measure things where orthodoxy is always going to win. How many kids do you have? I have 2. The average conservative Jew has 2. How many times do you light candles? How many times do you pray every day? There are a certain set of behaviors where orthodoxy is always going to win. We're going to be in second place and Reform is going to be in third. Ask a different question, though. Ask the question, though, who is leading American Jewish organizations? Who are the professional leaders of AIPAC and Federation and Jewish Studies and JCCs, etc., all across America? And the answer is overwhelmingly conservative Jews. To a slight extent, Reform Jews and modern Orthodox Jews, certainly not ultra-Orthodox Jews. They have nothing to do with the rest of the Jewish community. Why are we not succeeding as well as we could? Okay? Here's another thing. So why are we not succeeding? Because we don't have as much money. So where does most conservative money go? This is a sore point for me. I'm the Chancellor of the Jewish Theological Seminary. I spend a large portion of my time fundraising. You know that something like 7% of Jewish money goes to Jewish causes. 93% of Jewish philanthropy goes to non-Jewish causes. Reform Jews support Reform Judaism, and Orthodox Jews support only Orthodoxy. To a much larger extent, the conservative Jews support conservative institutions because we believe in Klal Yisrael. We believe in the Jewish people. So our money goes out to the larger Jewish community to a degree not true of either Reform or Orthodoxy. How does Orthodoxy get to have 10 shlichim on the NYU campus, where my son is currently in law school? We're lucky. We have one. We have a handful of shlichim on college campuses all across America. We have a few here and there. Orthodoxy has 10 at NYU alone. Who pays for this? The answer is Kashrut certification pays for this. Every time you and I buy a product called OU, Procter & Gamble sends a fee to the Union of Orthodox Congregations, the OU, they make money which they then put into outreach. I would too if I were them. But we should recognize, and again, before we beat our breasts, I'm addressing your morale question. We have low morale. We should be proud. We are doing great things as a movement. Yes, our numbers are falling. So if that's the only thing that matters, I do care about this. Because someone comes to me, I'm not making this up, and says, why should I support you? You're attached to conservative Judaism, and you're dying. I'm going to give my money to Chabad. Do you care about this kind of Judaism or not? Right? Is this you? Is Chabad you? No, I'm not Chabad. But I'm worried about my grandchildren. We can't do this. We have to believe in ourselves and be proud of ourselves. And I am proud of conservative Jews. So if the only thing that matters in life is how many ritual observances you perform, we're going to lose on that count.
Wait, hang on, Karen. Wait.
She got me started.
I know, no, you're okay. One question at a time. Douglas.
My question has to do with Jewish ignorance.
Yeah.
We're against it.
Rabbi Schulweis over the course
Yeah.
of this weekend. You cannot study the rabbi without some foundation in Judaism. I will tell you, it took me almost 10 years to kind of get what he was talking about. And yet, when I come to this shul on high holidays, I will tell you the number of blank stares grows every year. And so, how do we produce conservative Jews in the face of a declining level of Jewish knowledge?
Okay, good question. How do you produce conservative Jews in the face of a declining level of Jewish knowledge?
First of all, just reinforce your question. The pivotal chapter here, on which everything else turns, is the chapter called learning. To be a Jew, you've got to learn. And to be a conservative Jew, paradoxically, you have to learn even more because you have to understand this combination of continuity and change that we stand for. You think we make it up, and then you go back and study some Jewish history, and you realize we've been doing this for 2,000 years already. We are doing what the rabbis did 2,000 years ago, which is the Judaism we currently have. So you have to learn in order to be a Jew. One of the mistakes we made, we did a good thing by building some day schools. You're never going to persuade most Jews to go to day schools. We have not devoted resources to congregational schools. We have consciously, time after time, chosen not to devote significant resources to congregation schools. Mistake, terrible mistake. I can tell you the names of two major foundations, that's not a secret, the Jim Joseph Foundation and the Avichai Foundation, both of which refused on principle to spend $1 on congregational schools because they thought it was a waste of money. They poured millions into day schools, which is money well spent, but they won't support congregational schools to this day. And they would say, well, first the parents have to wake up. The parents have to be committed. But, a lot of the parents are themselves the products of an inferior education. So we've got a vicious circle we've got to break. Rabbi Feinstein knows that every time you have a Jew in a room, you have an opportunity and an obligation for education. And I think that unfortunately, we don't take advantage of that as much as we should. And now I'm going to venture into controversial territory. I would say that if we get Jews together in a room for a synagogue service, going through the matbeat tefillah, the formal order of prayer as it's written in the book, is not the most important thing to do with those Jews in that moment. And because we have to reach their souls, and we have to teach them something. We have to stir them. We have to motivate them. As you said, we have to educate them. So my motive is that they're going to come out of that room feeling more connected than when they were when they walked in the door, less lonely, and more of a sense that Judaism has a meaning for me in my life. So I want to spend my time together with other Jews doing things that are not written down. I want to get them talking. I want to talk to them. I want discussions like this. I don't want formalities. And unfortunately, you're right. We have these once-a-year Jews, and I'm not sure we take advantage of that once a year the way we should.
Okay. Yeah, please. What? Because I'll get to you. Please, Vaksha.
And I want to go back to your analogy of the Venn diagram. Let's say, and somebody's talking, trying to explain their Judaism to non-Jews. And they say, well, do you believe in God? Do you believe in God? Well, I don't know. I'm secular. I'm religious. I'm not religious. What are we? Are we a culture? Are we a nation? Are we an ethnic group? How do we explain what we are to people who don't know us?
Okay.
How do you explain what we are to people who don't know us? First paragraph. To my mind, the question of what conservative Judaism stands for is best answered by stating where conservative Jews stand and with whom. I believe the Jews alive today are the heirs to the Jewish story that began according to Torah with Abraham and Sarah. We stand at Sinai with every previous generation of the children of Israel and are called to reaffirm the promises made there to God, to one another, and to the world. I am convinced, humbly but firmly, that the Sinai covenant continues today through us. Participation in the set of relationships entailed by the covenant adds immeasurably to the meaning, joy, and purpose in our lives. That covenant establishes us as a people and a faith at the same time. That's what I said earlier is unique to us. Nobody else has that. Are the Jews a people? Yes. Is religion a part of this? Yes. But we're not dogmatic. Nowhere do you have a Nicene Creed. Nowhere as a Jew do you have to swear allegiance, I believe this, this, and this. So we say the Shema Yisrael, Hashem Eloheinu, Hashem Echad, and we disagree about what it means. What does that word Echad there mean? Does it mean one? Does it mean unique? How one? How unique? Etc., etc. We're created in the image of God. What does it mean to be created in the image of God? Right? So I think we have to hold fast to this. We cannot give up the religion piece, however you redefine it. Harold Schulweis redefined it. Mordechai Kaplan redefined it, but you can't give it up. We can't give up the peoplehood piece. There are Jews, I know many of them, you probably do, who say, I have nothing to do with Jewish people. My Judaism is spiritual. I have nothing to do with that state over there in the Middle East, nothing to do with that. 50% of the American Jews, here, you want numbers? I give you numbers. 50% of American Jews say, I owe nothing more to my fellow Jews than I owe to an average person on the street. They feel no obligation to the Jewish community. 50% of American Jews. Shocking to me. Because they think that if they owe something special to Jews, they're somehow anti-humanist, or anti-universal, or they're tribal, or God forbid even racist. So people have done a job on us and convinced us that either you're universal, to use our language, or you're particular, and from Sinai onward, from our founding story onward, we are both. God says, I have a covenant with you. God doesn't say, I don't have a covenant with everybody else. Quite the contrary. God has a covenant with all children of Noah. So I have a covenant with you. I have a covenant with the children of Noah. Does God have a covenant with Islam? I don't know. It's not my business, I assume. Seriously, right? I'm not the only one to have a covenant, but this is my people. This is my set of values. This is what I'm going to do in the world.
So the world
So we need this word people,
But it's more than that. It's people, it's faith, it's culture.
all of them together.
It's not. See, the
Right.
problem is these are words that divide a phenomenon up into small pieces, and the divisions don't match
Right.
us. The divisions don't match us because we are a people, but we're also a faith, and we're a faith, and we're also culture, and we're a culture, and we're also community. You can't divide us the way that these words divide.
So Rabbi Feinstein earlier mentioned this
You get
book
that.
by Will Herberg called Protestant Catholic Jew that came out in 1954. Mordecai Kaplan in 1934, 20 years earlier, said this definition is going to be the end of us. In other words, if we tell America we are a Jew, just like a Christian is a Christian, we're lopping off most of what it means to be a Jew. You don't need to have the arts and music. Christians don't have a homeland because we're a nation, we're a people, we're not just a faith. So religion is a piece of it, but it's only a piece of it. Abraham Joshua Heschel himself said religion is a means to an end. It's not the end. That's so Jewish.
Please.
Being Jewish is also being able to ask questions, right? And you are the Chancellor of the Jewish Theological Seminary. You train rabbis, you train educators, and you say we have to do something about this. We're sitting in Los Angeles with a big Jewish community, but I've had the experience in the last years of living in smaller Jewish communities. They can't get rabbis, they can't get educators, they cannot get people to do what you want them to do. I want to know where Rabbi Farkas is. I asked him, we need a rabbi in Winnipeg. Will you come to Winnipeg? Will you go to Palm Desert? Will you go to Cheyenne, Wyoming? There's no way to reach, there are Jews there too. How do you reach them in the smaller communities with your people that you're training?
If you have a choice between Winnipeg or Palm Desert,
Depends if you like to ski or you like the heat.
good question. Small Jewish communities and the difficulty of finding both professional leaders and the resources to build Jewish life in those places.
So I'll answer the question in two ways. As you might expect, the resources are limited. We have a full-time faculty of 40 and a student body of something like 400 and some, 430, 440. And there are lots of Jewish communities, and we can't reach all of them directly. We do our best. We can't send faculty everywhere. So we're doing a lot more on the web, and there's a lot more web education happening. But your question really speaks to the point that we have a terrible shortage of rabbis and educators in the Jewish community in America today, a terrible shortage. And that shortage is growing more and more acute. So it's going to be worse in the next generation. One of the products of living in two civilizations, we send our kids to college, we send our kids to graduate school. I didn't become a rabbi, I became a professor. Later in life, I sort of found my way back to a Jewish institution. Neither of my kids is interested in being either a rabbi or a Jewish educator. I'm really proud of my kids. They'll do good things in the world. We don't have enough people. We're really short of people. Now, when we get a hold of them, we train them in new ways. So I can tell you, we don't have the time to go into this in detail, I can tell you the way that rabbis and cantors and educators at JTS are trained in 2015 is so different. I wouldn't say night and day, but substantially different from the way it was even 10 years ago. Because we're trying to respond to this changing situation and be relevant. So we're giving them skills and connections that people never had before. But, go ahead. Absolutely.
Because they couldn't, the clergy couldn't do everything.
Absolutely.
Maybe there's a room for another program in your educational institution
We're on it.
to create lay people, to train lay people. To
That's right.
put there for a number of months or however you do it, and train people to go out
Right.
to this smaller community.
There was, 5 years ago, no program in clinical pastoral education at a Jewish institution. We got a grant from the Revson Foundation. We set up what is now the finest such program in any Jewish institution, one of the finest in America. We began by training our rabbis, and then we trained other people's rabbis, and now we're training Catholic, Protestant, Islamic and Jewish clergy in the summer. And this year we began a program where we're taking it out to synagogues to work with Bikur Cholim committees and Chevra Kadishas and this, like, to train lay people to do the services that our rabbinical students and rabbis are learning to do for this program in clinical pastoral education. We have just set up a program on spiritual arts. Again, we're going to start with the people at JTS, quickly go outside from JTS, and then we're going to have resources available to every community in the world that wants it, on the web and in person, to improve spirituality by use of the arts. We're about to do the same thing with social justice. So your model is exactly correct. The Schulweis model of para-rabbis is exactly where we have to go. Lay people have to take more responsibility for their communities. That's exactly right. And throwing it all on the rabbis, which happened a generation or two ago, is the opposite way from where we need to go.
We're
Absolutely
going
right.
to conclude. So I want to.
we
I'm
can't
going to
conclude.
ask
We're
you.
having too
I'm gonna
good a time, Ed.
One more question. So Harold Schulweis of blessed memory left us a lamp. It's an amazing thing. You rub it, and a genie comes out, and he gives you 3 wishes. So, Professor, Dr. Chancellor Eisen, 3 priorities, 3 wishes, 3 moves in our community that you think we need in order to accomplish the dreams that you've talked about. What are they?
Boy, talk about hard questions. The third one, of course, is I get 3 more wishes after that, and 3 more wishes after that.
No, wise guys.
No, come on. So it's a circle. I'm with the gentleman over here talking about education. That's my role in life. I'm a teacher, and I'm here today because I got a superb Jewish education as a kid, taught by great teachers who not only loved Torah but loved me and showed me that love of Torah and love of students goes together, and that love kind of infused all we do, and more loving teachers who open up Judaism to people so it's something you know can last you your whole life. Number one, I wish we could get a large segment of our American Jewish population and get them to have experiences of Jewish learning that was exciting to them, so they recognize there's a whole world there and their self-fulfillment is tied up to that learning. Number two, I wish I could give every American Jew, I would even settle for 50% of American Jews, an experience of Jewish community. An experience of Jewish community. Most American Jews have never had one. There is stuff that we take for granted as a member of a conservative synagogue. Most conservative Jews, most American Jews, have never had it. It's very sad. They haven't been comforted by a shiva. They haven't celebrated a Jewish wedding of their own. They haven't had a bar mitzvah of the sort I described last night that my kids had, that you have here at VBS. So I want to give people experiences of community that I'm convinced would get them to come back for more and for more and for more, and eventually we'd have a vibrant Jewish community. So I'm at my third, and of course I feel like I need at least 4. 3 is not going to make it. So I'm going to cheat and do 4. Number 3, I'm really upset about Israel, but I'm also upset about the fact that American Jews can no longer talk to each other about Israel. I think that this has now become an urgent matter. I called a meeting at JTS last year of Jews from all the movements and synagogues and federations, and everybody came and everybody testified that in their particular corner of the Jewish world, you can no longer talk about Israel because you can't do it civilly, and therefore people decided to take it off the table. It's not talked about. Talking to Israelis is another thing. Last week we had a dialogue at JTS, again behind closed doors, of American Jews and Israelis trying to say some honest things to each other. This is of crisis proportions. Israel needs us, it needs our voices. I'm not taking one political stance here. I'm saying that we've got to be able to talk to each other about this. After the Iran thing happened, the American Jewish establishment realized it can't go on like this. I mean, you had people leaving Federation, not contributing money because the Federation refused to take the stand they wanted it to take on the Iran deal. This is very bad. And Jews have got to come together, not just on Israel, but on other things. So one of my third wishes would have to be for Jews to regain the ability to disagree with each other, l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven. And I have this thing about climate change because I'm married to someone who believes it is a crisis that's urgently important, and she's brought me around and she's gotten me to read all sorts of things, and I've read them. I really do think that if we don't act urgently, we're going to see the destruction of human life on this planet. That has to be at the top of every religious agenda. Jew, Christian, Muslim, everyone, conservative, Reform, Orthodox Jew. Saving God's creatures and God's planet has got to be at the top of everyone's agenda. And to make this into a partisan political battle where we disagree about whether we can afford to lose some jobs about this, we're talking about saving the planet here. And this has got to be all of our priority, I think, for the next generation. That's my wish. Let's save the planet.
I want to thank Chancellor Eisen for being with us. Shabbos.